Planned maintenance for planned pleasure. Vacation and travel pleasure. Obviously the plan of every GMC motorhome owner. And to plan for the most trouble-free pleasure, remember that underneath the motorhome there's a chassis that gets you there reliably. This quality automotive equipment requires maintenance just like any other vehicle. The recommended maintenance schedule for your motorhome chassis is divided into 3 parts: lubrication and general maintenance, safety maintenance, and emission control maintenance. Lubrication and general maintenance services, due every 3,000 miles or 3 months, prolong the vehicle's operating life. These services also help it operate more efficiently and also provide for upkeep of some items which are subject to normal wear. Safety maintenance, tires, brakes, exhaust, steering and suspension checks, and so on, should be on a 6-month or 6,000-mile cycle, that is, with every other lubrication and general maintenance. Some of these items also are subject to normal wear, and checking and maintaining them properly are your assurance of safe driving. Emission control maintenance is related generally to the engine and includes the services normally performed in a tune-up, also on a 6-month or 6,000-mile cycle. Keeping up the emission maintenance as scheduled will give you the best engine performance and fuel economy and will assure that your motorhome is doing its part to keep our air clean. Also, to keep the 5-year or 50,000-mile emission control warranty in effect, the scheduled emission maintenance is required. While the services in the schedule are generally set up for multiples of 3 months or 3,000 miles, whichever occurs first, in severe operations, such as heavy dust or continuous short trips, it's a good idea to plan for more frequent maintenance. Your GMC motorhome dealer is best qualified to perform the planned maintenance to your motorhome needs for most reliable operation, since they know the vehicle best and use only approved lubricants and replacement parts. The service department at your GMC motorhome dealer will maintain a planned maintenance history folder for you, will use approved check sheets to be sure all the necessary checks are performed, and will maintain your personal service log so you always know where your maintenance program stands. Following now are the explanations of the specific services to be performed, starting with the lubrication and general maintenance schedule. Every 3 months or 3,000 miles, lubricate the chassis at all the points specified in this diagram. Use a lithium soap multi-purpose chassis grease that meets the requirements of GM 6031M on all fittings in the rear suspension, steering linkage, and front suspension. Also use chassis grease to lubricate the parking brake cable linkage. Lubricate the brake pedal spring and the transmission linkage with engine oil. Also, at the 3,000-mile check, change the engine oil using only high-quality SE grade of oil. The proper oil quality is essential for effective lubrication of the engine. Between changes, maintain the oil between the add and full marks on the dipstick. It should be checked more frequently during the break-in period when some oil may be consumed. Replace the oil filter at the first oil change. After that, replace the filter at every other oil change. The drive belt on the living area water pump also should be inspected at 3-month intervals. Replace it if it's worn. Adjust the tension if it's loose. At 6,000 miles or 6 months, check all the vehicle's fluid levels in the brake master cylinder, power steering pump, batteries, transmission, engine, final drive, and windshield washer. If any level is low, try to determine if a problem is indicated. To check the brake fluid, clean the brake master cylinder before you remove the cap. Keep out dirt and fasten the retainer securely after the check. The brake master cylinder level should be 1/4 inch below the top in each reservoir. The rear reservoir level will drop normally as the disc brake pads wear and the caliper pistons take up the clearance. If you must add fluid, use only Delco Supreme number 11 or .3 brake fluid or the equivalent. In case of an abnormal reduction in fluid level, be sure to inspect the system for leakage and make the necessary repairs. The power steering fluid should be between the full and hot marks when the system is at operating temperature of 150 degrees. The dipstick will be hot to the touch. At room temperature, check the level between the hot and add marks. If the level is low, be sure to check the system for leakage and repair it. To replenish the fluid, use GM Power Steering Fluid, part number 1050017. If that's not available, you can use Dexron 2 automatic transmission fluid. Test the engine coolant for antifreeze protection to at least -20 degrees. If the vehicle will be exposed to temperatures lower than 20 below, the antifreeze should provide protection to the lowest temperature that will be encountered. Check the coolant level at the recovery tank, not at the radiator cap. It should be up to the cold or hot mark, depending on the engine temperature. If it's low, perform a leak test. Add coolant to the recovery tank, not the radiator. Use a 50-50 mixture of plain water and Glycol antifreeze that meets GM specification 1899M. Alcohol, methanol, and plain water are not recommended at any time. Check the transmission fluid. However, the engine must be running, the vehicle on a level surface, and the transmission at operating temperature. Measure the fluid level with the transmission in park. If it's between full and add 1 pint, the level is okay, so leave it alone. Don't overfill the transmission, ever. Overfilling can cause foaming and lead to problems. If it's below the add mark, bring the level up to full with Dexron 2 automatic transmission fluid. Do not use fluid other than Dexron 2. Also, at 6,000 miles or 6 months, check the air conditioning system hoses and sight glass. Replace any deteriorated hoses. Remove the filter from the air compressor. Wash it with soap and water and reinstall it, or replace it with a new filter. To equalize tire wear, rotate the tires according to the diagram in the owner manual and adjust the pressures to the specification on the glove box door. Tighten the wheel nuts to the specified torque. Then be sure the torque is checked again after 500 miles following the wheel installation. At 12 months or 12,000 miles, the lubrication schedule calls for changing the fluid and filter in the automatic transmission and the fluid in the final drive, plus a complete cooling system check. Remove the bottom pan to drain the transmission and remove the filter. Use a new filter, a new O-ring on the intake pipe, and a new pan gasket. Install 4 quarts of specified Dexron fluid and check the fluid level as described earlier. To drain the final drive, remove the cover attaching bolts. Use a new gasket when you replace the cover. Add 4 pints of SAE 80 or SAE 90 GL5 gear lubricant through the fill hole, or enough to fill the drive to the bottom of the hole. Wash the radiator cap and filler neck. Then pressure test the cooling system and the radiator cap. Also, clean the exterior of the radiator core and air conditioning condenser. Inspect the hoses and all the clamps. It's recommended that the hoses be replaced routinely at 24 months or 24,000 miles, or earlier if they're deteriorated. At the same time you replace hoses, the cooling system should be drained, flushed, and filled with a fresh mixture of water and Glycol antifreeze. Be sure to follow the procedure described in the manual. Also, at 24,000 miles, clean and repack the rear wheel bearings using lithium soap multi-purpose chassis grease that meets the requirements of GM 6031M. Make sure you inspect for chips on rollers, cone wear, discoloration from heat, and wear on the spindles. And check the final drive boots and output shaft seal for leakage or damage. Replace defective parts if necessary. That concludes the lube and general maintenance schedule. Now, let's explain the safety maintenance schedule, starting with the 6 months or 6,000-mile inspections. First, all of the hydraulic lines and hoses for the brakes and power steering should be inspected carefully for damage and deterioration. Correct any conditions that cause chafing or abrasion, and replace any defective lines. Inspect both the chassis exhaust and the motor generator exhaust system for any evidence of leakage or damaged parts. Check all the engine accessory drive belts for fraying, cracks, wear, and proper tension. Make any necessary repairs or replacement. GMC recommends replacing the belts routinely at 24 months or 24,000 miles, whichever comes first, as a precaution against possible failure. Also, check the suspension. Check for bushing wear, bent control arms, proper alignment, pin wear, and leaking grease seals. Also, make sure the Zerk fittings are free and will receive grease. Check the steering mechanisms too. Check the fluid level. Make sure seals aren't leaking. See that the intermediate shaft is free. Check the torque on the tie rod and drag link nuts and make sure the cotter keys are still in. Along with rotating the tires and adjusting the air pressure as recommended, inspect the tires for wear and damage, and also the wheels for cracks or damage. Look at the disc brake pads and wear indicators. New brake pads should be installed if the wear indicator is close to or against the rotor. Check the rotors to be sure they aren't scored or damaged. The maintenance schedule also lists about 20 simple checks the owner can make without any special technical know-how, such as fluid levels, the horn, condition of glass, and so forth. These should be checked regularly during operation, but at least every 6 months or 6,000 miles. The rest of the safety maintenance by qualified technicians is scheduled for every 12 months or 12,000 miles. The rear brake drums should be pulled to inspect the brake linings, drums, wheel cylinders, hydraulic lines. Also, check the parking brake adjustment for drag, and remember that the mechanism should be greased during the chassis lubrication. Inspect the engine throttle linkage for damaged parts. Be sure it operates freely to wide-open throttle and closes smoothly and completely when released. Check the headlights for proper aim and adjust the aim if necessary. This is an important point which is too often forgotten. Wash the underbody thoroughly. Be sure to flush out any cavities or corners where salt or dirt accumulate. Inspect the entire underbody for damage. If the vehicle has been driven where salt or similar chemicals are used to control dust or remove snow, an underbody check should be made yearly. The best time is usually after the winter season. And that's the story on safety inspections. Emission control maintenance covers, in general, the engine tune-up services and maintenance of emission control devices for engine performance, economy, and clean breathing. At the first 6-month service, then every 12 months, inspect the installation of ducts and hoses for the thermostatically controlled air cleaner. Check that the valve operates freely. Free it with solvent if necessary, and lubricate it for continued free operation. See that the choke mechanism operates freely. Use a carburetor cleaner solvent to remove any gum collected on the shaft or plates and correct any damage you see. If the motorhome is equipped with HEI, the HEI system does not require periodic maintenance. However, if the motorhome does not have HEI, this is a minor tune-up time. So, for motorhomes without HEI, replace the breaker points every 12,000 miles and the cam lubricator every other tune-up. Carefully inspect the rotor, cap, and coil for any needed replacement. Replace the spark plugs every 6,000 miles if the vehicle is using leaded gas, which leaves a deposit on the electrodes. With non-leaded gas, replace them at the regular 12,000-mile tune-up interval. Also, check the plug high-tension wires, including the coil-to-cap wire on vehicles without HEI. Remove any corrosion from the terminals. Replace any deteriorated wire, and be sure they're all installed with good electrical contact. On motorhomes without HEI, also adjust the point dwell to exact specifications on the engine decal using a dwell meter. Follow the decal specifications also for timing and idle. Set the timing after the point dwell is set, since both are critical on an emission-controlled engine. Vehicles with HEI, though, do not have points to be adjusted. Replace the carburetor inlet fuel filter every 12,000 miles, or more often if it becomes clogged. Tighten the carburetor mounting bolts or nuts and the intake manifold bolts to the specified torque at the first 6,000-mile service only. Adjust the carburetor idle speed. The idle mixture limiter screws should not be removed except for major repair. Use an accurate CO meter or the alternate mechanical lean drop method to set the idle mixture if the idle quality is poor and the limiters must be disturbed. Perform a functional test on the thermal vacuum switch used to protect the engine from overheating. Remove the distributor vacuum hose from the port marked D and attach a vacuum gauge. There should be 5 inches or less of vacuum, with the engine idling at normal operating temperature. If the gauge reads manifold vacuum and the engine is not overheated, replace the valve. Also, inspect the hoses from the valve to the carburetor, manifold, and distributor diaphragm. Replace any that are cracked or deteriorated. Check the positive crankcase ventilation system for satisfactory operation and clean the filter at every 12,000-mile service. Replace the PCV valve at 24,000 miles and blow out the valve hose with compressed air. If the vehicle operates in severe conditions, service this at 12,000 miles instead. The carburetor air cleaner element also should be replaced at the 12,000-mile interval for normal operation, or more frequently if the vehicle operates in dusty areas. Check all the lines, hoses, and charcoal canister in the evaporation control system, and make any repairs needed to be sure no raw gas vapors escape to the atmosphere. Replace the filter in the bottom of the canister during this check. If the chassis has 2 canisters, only the lower one has a filter. And check the fuel tanks, fuel caps, and fuel lines for any damage that might cause leakage. Be sure the cap seals tightly. Replace any damaged parts. Finally, refer to booklet X7428, GMC Motorhome Planned Maintenance, for maintenance check sheets and a history folder imprint to help you provide an effective, planned maintenance program for your customers. The booklet also contains a separate planned maintenance schedule for motor generators, covered in another film, MH-16, and checklists for trip preparation and storage. Help your customers plan their pleasure to help assure reliable motorhome operation. Planned maintenance for planned pleasure starts with the recommended schedules for lubrication, safety, and emission control maintenance services. Perform them with the approved shop manual procedures, and it will end with solid customer satisfaction.